Okay guys, welcome back. You should have this enormously large packet in front of you. We're just going to do a little bit at a time and just spread this over a few days. So let's just look at some of the first few problems. So I've given you multiple of each type, but we're just going to work through the first two, and then I'm going to let you go back later and work on the rest of them on your own. So as we go through each section, again, we'll generally do two and then you do the rest. So, but before we do that, I want to have you remember the three forms of a line are y equals mx plus b. That's called our slope-intercept. Right, then we have y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. That is our point slope. And then our last one is ax plus by equals c. That's our standard form. And you're going to notice that at the beginning of each of these sections, I tell you what form to write it in, right? So standard form, down here we've got standard form. But what I want you to remember is that it's never a good idea to write an equation in standard form to begin with, right? That's always an ending point for it. But it's never a beginning point for it. If we're trying to write an equation of a line, we're going to do y equals mx plus b or y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. So as we do each of these problems, I'm going to ask you to think about which of those two we should use, and then we'll talk about how to take it from one of these two forms into that form. So we did a little work on the last video about transferring them from one of these two forms to this form. We'll keep talking about that in this form. On this video. Okay, so the thing that we need to remember again is the difference, besides the obvious visual differences between these two forms of a line, the difference is that in this one we know the y-intercept and in this one we do not. We just know a random point. So as we go through, I want you to get in the habit of asking yourself, do I know the y-intercept or do I not know the y-intercept? Do I know just a random point? So we're going to go through and have whole sections of ones that are of one type or the other. So it's going to seem a little bit redundant to keep asking that question, but I want you to keep thinking about it. I don't want you to just think about it in this section or just think about it in the next section. I want you to think about it all the time. Do I know the y-intercept? Do I not know the y-intercept? And then the second question, which is not relevant at first here, is do I know the slope or do I need to find the slope? Right, so those are the two things I'm going to be asking you a lot. You'll get sick of them. You realize that they're probably important and you should be asking them yourselves. Okay, so here is the information that or here's the directions. Write the standard form of the equation of the line through the given point with the given slope. So we know a point, we're given a point, and we are given the slope. And that is always a very happy thing when we're given the slope. Right? It's so much easier to do problems when we're given the slope because that takes one whole step out of the process for us. Okay, so we're given a point and we're given the slope. We see them right here. So again, the first question I say, are you given the slope? Yes, we are. It's right here. The second question is, what is the point you're given? Is it the y-intercept or is it not the y-intercept? And again, we saw this in a previous video, but I'm going to just remind you, how do you know when you have the y-intercept? How do you know when you have the y-intercept? And the answer to that is that the point you're going to be given has an x coordinate that's 0 and some other number for the y coordinate. All right, and that other point could be 0, but the thing that's important is that x coordinate must be 0 for it to be the y-intercept. All right, so I go through here and I look and I say, is that the y-intercept? Well, yes, the x coordinate is 0, so it is the y-intercept. So if I have that, then I can use the slope-intercept form. All right, so I'm going to write it down, y equals mx plus b. And then I'm just going to fill in the information they give us. So I don't fill in anything for the y or the x. Those are part of the form of the equation. But I do fill in the slope, which is 1/3, and I do fill in the y-intercept, which is -6. All right, again, that's awkward to write it like that. I would write this as y equals 1/3 x minus 6 instead. All right, so we've done what they originally asked us. Write the equation of the line through the given point with the given slope. But then there is this little detail in here. Really, this says write the equation of the line through the given point with the given slope, and then write it in standard form. Okay, so we've done the first part. We've written the equation, but now we have to take it from this form and put it into standard form. Right, so if you remember from the last video, we had 6 different points that we had to make sure we checked off in order for us to say it's in standard form. So the first was get rid of any parentheses if applicable. So there are no parentheses, we're going to skip that. Second is get x and y together on one side. So I'm going to take and rewrite this as negative 1/3 x plus y equals -6. The second thing is get all constants together on the other side, already done. The next step would be to make sure x and y are in alphabetical order, which they are. I specifically did that so that that would be set up for us already. And then get rid of all fractions, right? So we do have a fraction here. That's the only one. That makes our job a little bit easier because we're just going to clear it out in one swoop by multiplying by 3. And then the next step, which we're going to have to do, is make sure that the coefficient of the x is positive. So instead of just going through and multiplying by 3 and then doing a next step, changing everything to the opposite sign, I'm going to do that all at once. All right, if you want to do it in 2 separate steps, ain't no thing. You go ahead and do that. All right, now I'm going to distribute these. So -3 times -1/3 is going to give us a positive 1x, or just x. -3 times y is going to give us -3y, and -3 times -6 is positive 18. And that is in standard form. Right, so again, we chose which of these 2 forms we needed based on the information that was given. We wrote the equation, and then in the second part of the problem, we changed it to standard form. Blech, that was a lot. Okay, so that should be your answer. Okay, let's look at number 2, and then we'll move on to the next section. All right, so it passes through the point 0, 2, and has a slope of -4/5. All right, so again, am I given the slope? Yes, you do your little happy dance because that makes your life a lot easier. And then I say, what is the point that's given? Is it the y-intercept or is it something other than the y-intercept? And again, because this x-coordinate is 0, it's the y-intercept. So we can use the y equals mx plus b. Okay, so then we're going to fill in what we know. We know that the slope is -4/5. And then we know the y-intercept is 2. Right? If this had said, write the slope-intercept form of the equation of the line through the given point, we would be done right here. It's already in slope-intercept form. But we're not done because we need to do all the steps to take it to standard form. All right, so get rid of any parentheses, done. Get the x term with the y term, so we're going to have 4/5 x plus y equals 2. Get all the constants together on the other side, that's already done. Get rid of the fractions. So we're going to multiply through here. We need to get rid of that 5 in the denominator, so we'll multiply everything by 5. So that becomes 4x plus 5y equals 10. Make sure x and y are in alphabetical order. They are. And make sure that the coefficient of the x is positive. It is. So that is our standard form. Okay, so later in an assignment, you're going to go back and do problems 3 through 6. Okay, now I'm still going to stick with us knowing one point being the y-intercept, but this time I'm not going to give you the slope. All right, so instead of saying here is the y-intercept or here is a point and here is the slope, instead I'm going to give you 2 points. All right, now when you do that, you might say, ah, dang, I don't know the slope, I don't know what to do. Well, yes, you do. Because you know how to find the slope if you're not given it. All right, remember we know y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So even if we're not given the slope, as long as we have 2 points, or later we'll find out that there's another way we can do it if we're not given 2 points, that we know how to find the slope. Okay, so let's do that. And also take note, it says when we're done, whatever form we choose, slope-intercept or point-slope, when we're done, we have to put it in standard form. So let's go ahead and find the slope of our, the line that goes through our 2 points. So we've got y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. All right, so -8 minus 3 is -11. and 0 minus 5 is -5. So our slope is 11/5. So now we say, okay, now I have the slope. I didn't have it at first, but now I do. Now I look at my 2 points and I say, do I have the y-intercept? Right? And you can look here and say, oh yes, I have one point that has a 0 as the x-coordinate, therefore I have the y-intercept, therefore I can use y equals mx plus b. All right, so then I say y equals 11/5 x plus, now I have to use this point if I'm using y equals mx plus b, so I have to use this as the y-intercept. Don't just grab this one because that came first. You have to use the y-intercept, so this is going to be plus -8. All right, again, awkward to write it that way, so we're going to write it y equals 11/5 x minus 8. All right, next we have to get it in standard form because we're done writing the equation part, but the next part of the problem says transfer it to standard form. Right, so I'm going to move the 11/5 x over to the other side. So we've got -11/5 x minus, plus y equals -8. I already have them in alphabetical order. The constant's already alone on the other side. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to clear the fraction. So again, only a single denominator here. So we only have to multiply by 5. But again, I'm going to pay attention to the fact that in another step, I'm going to have to change this coefficient to positive. So I'm going to do it all at once and multiply it through by -5 instead of just +5, and then again, changing the sign. So let me get all of these arrows drawn. -5 times -11/5, the 5's will cancel, and so I will end up with 11x minus 5y equals 40. Okay, let's do one more like that. This is on the next page now, problem 8. And again, then you'll have a couple more to do on your own. All right, so again, we look at this and we say, dang, I'm not given the slope. I have to find it first. All right, so let's do that. M equals y2. Actually, you know what? I'm not going to write the formula. Hopefully you've seen it enough in the last few class periods that you know it by now. So y2 is 1 minus y1, which is 4. x2 is 6 minus x1 is 0. So I get -3 over 6, which is -1/2. All right, so there's our slope. All right, then I ask, do I know the y-intercept, or do I only know other points besides the y-intercept? I see this 0 as the x-coordinate, so I know the y-intercept. So I can use y equals mx plus b. All right, I fill in my slope, -1/2. And then I fill in the y-intercept, 4. Don't pick the 1. It has to be with this one that's the y-intercept. All right, but again, it told me to write it in standard form, so I have to do all those steps. Get rid of parentheses, not applicable. Move the x over to the other side. All right, x and y are in alphabetical order. Constants are all on the other side. So now I'm down to just getting rid of that fraction. So it's going to be 2 times the equation that we had, 1/2 x plus y equals 4. 2 times 1/2 x gives me just x. 2 times y gives me 2y. And 2 times 4 is 8. And again, notice I didn't multiply through by -2 here. I did +2 because the x term was already positive. Okay, so again, those first 4 problems that we have done, every single problem, and the ones that you haven't done, even every single problem has the y-intercept included in there. Take advantage of that, right? Because from now on, we will not see a lot of y-intercepts. We will find that we're given 2 points that are not y-intercepts. So let's move on to the next section. And again, they're still having us write it in standard form. Write the standard form of the equation of the line that passes through the given point with the given slope. So if you remember the first section we did, these directions are identical. But the difference is we look at this point and we breathe a heavy sigh because this is not the y-intercept. All right, so we cannot use y equals mx plus b. That means we must use this second form, the point slope form, because the point that we're given is not the y-intercept. All right, so again here, the y1 and the x1, sorry, I shouldn't have circled that minus sign. The y1 and the x1 are the coordinates of the point that we're given. And then m is still the slope again. All right, so let's fill those in. So we've got y minus y1, which is the y coordinate of this point, which is 7, equals m, which is negative 5/3, times x minus x1, which is 2. Okay, again, if they had said write the point slope form of the equation of the line, we would be done, because that is the form that it's in. But it says write the standard form. All right, and again, sometimes it will say write the point slope, and you'll do a little happy dance because it's just one step. Sometimes it'll say write it in slope-intercept form, in which case there will be not such a happy jig because we'll still have to do work. But anyway, we just have to do what they say to do. So here we're going to do what they say to do. But again, if you remember in the last video, I said, hold off, don't get rid of the parentheses yet when this is a fraction out here. It's going to be better for us to go through and clear out that fraction first than it is to distribute. We're creating lots of baby fractions when we distribute. So let's clear out the fraction first. So we're going to multiply everything by 3. Again, that's the only fraction in here. So we're going to get 3y minus 21 equals, and again, remember, it's 3 times this whole term. There is not addition or subtraction between these two, so it's a single term. So 3 times negative 5/3, and again, that's the smart one to do. Don't do 3 times x minus 2. Do 3 times negative 5/3, so we're going to get negative 5. And now we've used up the 3, so this x minus 2 stays the same way. Okay, now let's go through and get rid of that parenthesis. So we've got 3y minus 21 equals negative 5x plus 10. I'm going to add the 5x to both sides, and I'm going to add 21 to both sides. Again, feel free to do that in 2 separate steps, but I'm going to do it in one. So we've got 5x plus 3y equals, when I add the 21 to the 10, I get 31. And that is our final answer. Again, x and y are in alphabetical order. We've cleared the fractions. The coefficient of the x term is positive. Okay, number 13, and then you've got, I think, 3 or 4 more to do. Actually, you know what? Well, let's do this one. Okay, so again, I'm given the slope, but the point I'm given is not the y-intercept. So I'm going to need to use y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. All right, let me fill in the values here. Y minus 1, our y term here, or our y coordinate. M is 1/2. X minus a negative 6, that's going to become a plus 6. Now, this would be one case where it would be okay to distribute, because I'm only going to get the half in front of the x, and half of 6 is 3. But still, I feel like it's a good habit to get into when you have this form, if you have a fraction here, just to clear it out right at the beginning. And I'm choosing 2 because that's the only fraction in the problem, and that's 2 is going to clear it out. So I get 2y minus 2 equals, and then again, 2 times this whole cluster, and I'm specifically going to pair these two together. So 2 times 1/2 is 1, times the x plus 6 is just x plus 6. I'm not sure why I put those parentheses there. Now I'm going to bring the x over to the other side, so negative x minus 2y equals, and I'm going to bring the 2 over to the right side. So I get equals 8. And then the last step is I have a negative coefficient on the x. I'm going to go through and change every sign. So the x will become positive, the negative 2 in front of the y will become positive 2y, and the positive 8 will become negative 8. Okay, hopefully you're feeling okay with those so far. And I'm going to stop the video right now, and then we'll come back and do some more problems. Bye.